Well, good to see you again. Got another one for you today. One that took me from the grimy streets to the hushed halls of what should have been a place of quiet contemplation. You know, after all those years pounding the pavement in the city, you get a feel for things. Most cases are variations on a theme. Love gone wrong, money gone missing, power corrupted. Simple, ugly human stuff. My job, it was always to cut through the noise, ignore the desperate pleas and the wild accusations, and find the cold, hard facts, and I got pretty good at it, if I do say so myself. The city, with its endless grind and constant rush, teaches you to be skeptical. You learn that if something looks like a miracle or a curse, it is usually just a trick, a con, a well-played hand. People are smart, often terrifyingly so, when they've got something to gain or something to hide. So, when I heard tales of the impossible, I didn't reach for a holy book, I reached for my notebook. I believed in fingerprints, alibis, and motives, not spirits or supernatural forces. That approach kept me sane, kept me grounded, when the world around me seemed to be spinning out of control. But every so often, a case would surface that genuinely made you scratch your head for a moment. One that came wrapped in layers of folklore, whispered warnings, and ancient dread. These weren't your typical urban muggings or corporate embezzlements. These were the ones that local folks, especially those away from the bright lights of the big towns, swore were the work of something other, something beyond human comprehension, and that's when my experience really came into play. Because when the general public is convinced by a ghost story, it often means someone very human is pulling the strings, hoping nobody looks too closely. My job became to unravel that deception, to show that even the most chilling supernatural claims can have a perfectly mundane, incredibly sinister explanation. You listen to the whispers, but you follow the evidence, always. This next case took me to a grand old museum, a place usually filled with dusty relics and hushed whispers of history. But when I got there, it was filled with something else entirely, a palpable, chilling fear. They were talking about a cursed artifact. I was talking about a professional at work. The call came from a frantic museum director, a drive. Alana Vargas, her voice tight with barely suppressed panic. "Detective," she stammered, "it has the mask. The new exhibit, it has cursed. We've had an incident. The serpent has a diamond. It has gone." The exhibit in question was the newly acquired Mask of Aztlan, a pre-Columbian ceremonial mask, intricately carved, with jade eyes that seemed to follow you. It was ancient, imposing, and came with a grim legend. Anyone who touched it, or even looked at it with ill intent, would be cursed. Misfortune would follow, health would fail, and eventually, their very soul would be claimed. For weeks after its installation, museum curators and security guards had been reporting a litany of unsettling phenomena. Strange, vivid nightmares filled with serpents and shadowy figures. Sudden, debilitating bouts of illness, headaches, nausea, and intense fatigue that couldn't be explained by any doctor. And even bizarre, inexplicable incidents like objects moving on their own in the exhibit hall, doors creaking open and shut when no one was near, and a pervasive, unidentifiable chill that seemed to emanate directly from the mask-ass display case. It was classic haunted house fare, but happening in a reputable institution. Then came the main event, the theft. The serpent-ass diamond, A priceless, fist-sized gemstone, the centerpiece of a neighboring exhibit, had vanished overnight. The display case was locked. The alarms were armed and showed no sign of tampering. The motion sensors hadn't triggered. The security cameras, pointed directly at the diamond-ass case, showed only static and distortion for a crucial 15-minute window during the early hours of the morning. No forced entry anywhere in the museum. It was as if the diamond had simply dematerialized. The staff was convinced. The mask had claimed another victim, and this time, it took the diamond with it. I walked into that museum, and the atmosphere was thick with fear and whispered tales. The guards looked pale. The curators were on edge. Drive. Vargas, usually a picture of academic calm, was wringing her hands, actually talking about hiring an exorcist. I listened to the wild stories, let them get it all out, and then I went to work. I wasn't looking for ancient spirits. I was looking for human ingenuity and the flaws in the system. I started with the basics: the security setup, alarms, motion sensors, cameras, all top of the line to good, in fact, for a simple smash and grab. The static on the camera feed was intriguing, not a total blackout, but distortion. I also looked at the display cases. High security glass, reinforced steel. No way someone just popped it open without leaving a trace. But as I ran my hand along the bottom edge of the diamond-ass display case, I felt it. A minute. Almost imperceptible sliver of extremely fine dust. Unlike the usual museum grime, it felt like crushed stone. But not just any stone. Next, I turned my attention to the cursed mask. While everyone was careful not to touch it, I observed it closely. I noticed that the area around the mask-ass display, particularly the glass itself, seemed to have a faint, almost oily film on its interior surface, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. And the reports of illness, they were primarily coming from guards who worked the night shift in that specific wing and from curators who spent extended time meticulously cataloging items nearby. This wasn't random bad luck. This was a pattern. I had the lab boys come in. We took samples of the dust from the diamond case, air samples from the exhibit hall, and a swab from the interior of the mask-ass display glass. While they worked, I started interviewing everyone again, focusing less on their ghost stories and more on their routines, their habits, their observations. I paid particular attention to a new security guard, a quiet, unassuming man named Arthur, who had only been on staff for a few months but seemed to have an uncanny knowledge of the museum-ass layouts and security protocols, far beyond what his short tenure suggested. He'd also, conveniently, been on duty during each cursed incident and was the one who discovered the diamond missing. He claimed the mask-ass power overwhelmed him, making him black out for the duration of the camera static. Too easy. The lab results confirmed my suspicions, ripping through the veil of superstition like a hot knife through butter. The dust from the diamond case, microscopic particles of industrial-grade ceramic, specifically designed to cut high-security glass with minimal sound and vibration, leaving almost no trace. The oily film on the mask-ass display glass, residue from an experimental, highly reactive chemical compound that, when heated or exposed to certain frequencies, could emit low-level electromagnetic interference. And the air samples, they contain trace amounts of a specialized, airborne hallucinogen, a potent but short-acting compound that could induce nightmares, nausea, and disorientation, especially in enclosed, poorly ventilated spaces. Now, the whole sinister picture snapped into focus. This wasn't a curse. It was a brilliantly orchestrated, multi-layered heist, using the museum as own atmosphere and an existing legend as the perfect camouflage. Here's how it went down. Plain as day. Arthur, the new security guard, wasn't he just a guard? He was a professional thief, or working for one, planted months in advance. He'd done his homework, meticulously studying the museum as layout, its staff as habits, and crucially, its local legends. He knew about the Mask of Istlan and its curse. His plan was chillingly simple in its execution, but fiendishly complex in its setup. First, he subtly introduced the airborne hallucinogen into the ventilation system of that specific wing, perhaps through a tiny, disguised dispenser in his uniform or a hidden vent. This low-level exposure, particularly to those on long shifts or spending extended time in the enclosed space, would induce the nightmares, nausea, and disorientation, slowly eroding their skepticism and priming them for the supernatural. He subtly manipulated environmental factors like humidity or temperature, enhancing the effect. The objects moving on their own were small, imperceptible nudges or string tricks, easy to do when everyone is on edge and convinced of ghostly activity. Second, he applied that specialized chemical compound onto the interior of the mask as display glass. This compound, when triggered by a specific, high-frequency signal emitted from a device he carried, disguised as a flashlight or a pager, would create a localized electromagnetic field. This field was specifically designed to jam the security camera's signals for precisely 15 minutes, causing the static and distortion on their feed. It also created the unidentifiable chill and could slightly affect sensitive electronics nearby, contributing to the cursed feeling. On the night of the theft, Arthur triggered the jammer, with the cameras blinded. He then used specialized, diamond-tipped ceramic cutting tools, the source of that fine dust, to make an almost invisible, clean cut in the reinforced glass of the Serpent Assay display case. These tools are designed to be virtually silent and leave minimal evidence. He simply lifted the diamond through the precisely cut hole, resealed it with a custom, fast bonding adhesive to make it appear untouched, and slipped away into the night. His feigned blackout was a perfect alibi, easily explained by the pervasive curse. The museum staff, already conditioned by weeks of hallucinogen-induced distress and the growing belief in the mask as curse, simply attributed the theft to the supernatural power of the artifact. They were so busy fearing the unseen that they completely missed the very human hand that took their most valuable treasure. No curse, just a thief who knew how to turn fear into his greatest asset. So, there you have it, the case of the museum as cursed artifact and the vanishing diamond. No ancient spirits, no vengeful gods exacting justice. Just another perfectly rational, albeit utterly deplorable, instance of human greed and an almost artistic level of deception. This one stuck with me because it showed how belief, especially in the fantastic, can be a blindfold, obscuring the simplest truths. These curators, these guards, intelligent people dedicated to preserving history, were so primed by the legend and their own unsettling experiences that they literally couldn't see the forest for the trees. They were looking for ghosts when they should have been looking for fingerprints, or, in this case, microscopic ceramic dust. It has a chilling thought, isn't it? that the most dangerous criminals don't always need brute force or a noisy getaway. Sometimes, all they need is a good story, a dash of science, and an audience ready to be convinced that something supernatural is at play. They rely on our natural inclination to seek meaning in the inexplicable, to attribute power to the unknown, especially when it benefits their illicit goals. They want you to blame the curse, not the quiet, unassuming security guard. For me, it cemented the idea that human ingenuity, when applied to wickedness, can be far more terrifying and elaborate than any supernatural phenomenon. A skilled criminal doesn't just break in, they craft an entire alternate reality to cover their tracks. So, the next time you hear a wild tale of a cursed object or a haunted place, and things start to go missing, pause. Don't jump to conclusions, no matter how thrilling or terrifying they might seem. Look for the small details, the unusual smell, the subtle residue, the one person who seems a little too familiar with the supernatural occurrences. Because often, the true horror isn't some ancient curse, it has the cold, calculated intent of another human being. And that, in my book, is far more terrifying. Until next time, stay curious, but always stay skeptical.